So before I begin, I'd like to start by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm joining, and also custodians of all the places from which anyone may be joining this presentation or watching this presentation from. And I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, emerging. This presentation is part of a series of presentations we do each month. This week's one is on indoor plants, and because it's mental health month, this month of October, we've decided to give all of our presentations the theme of mental health and wellbeing. So this presentation is about indoor plants, and the focus is on how indoor plants are really, really good for your mental health and your wellbeing. We're doing this on mental health, like I said, because it's Mental Health Month in October, and also October 10th coming up is World Mental Health Day. We see it as really, really important. Everyone's aware of the mental health challenges that everyone's facing, particularly nowadays that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And what we know from what we do at Farmwall with plants, greenery and aquaponics is that plants and greenery and green spaces are a really, really good tool for improving mental health and well-being. Actually, one of the best tools to incorporate or include in your day-to-day life for helping improve your own mental health and well-being. There's a lot of research to back this up. There was a time when the idea of nature and natural design helping with your mental health or your concentration or with your well-being was a new idea or an untested idea, and that moment is well and truly in the past. There is a wealth of research from the past 10 and 20 years that shows exactly what people have suspected for a long time, which is that plants and greenery are really, really good for your mental health. They're really, really good for concentration, productivity, for stress reduction. They clean the air, which we knew about forests and rainforests and the bush and stuff like that, but now we know they also have a positive benefit to air purity indoors, and they also improve your physical health in a few other ways. And this whole idea around why they're good for us as humans is usually spoken about using the term biophilia. It's in all of us. We've evolved this tendency towards nature, which is called biophilia. The idea was pioneered by the person you can see in the image on the left, Edward O. Wilson, and he defined it as the innately emotional affiliation of human beings to other living organisms. So our tendency and our desire to be connected with living things, and that includes plants. We were really, really lucky recently at Farmwall to have Dr. Dominique Hess as a guest speaker in one of our events for last month, which is Biodiversity Month. You can see Dominique in that image in the middle of the slide. What Dominique spoke about amongst biodiversity and biodiversity in the city was that was a bit about why we have this connection to nature and why we seek this. And I won't go into all of the neuroscience in as much detail as Dr. Dominique did, because she's certainly the expert in it. But something I wanted to highlight from that was that she spoke a lot about the amygdala. And if you look at the image of the brain that's on the slide here, you can see the amygdala is this tiny, tiny little part of the brain right in the center. And the reason that's so important is because all of our sensory inputs, so smell, sight, touch, everything, the very first signals that are sent to the brain from all of those senses goes to the amygdala, and that is where the flight or fight response is generated. And that's what people talk about, something we've evolved to have, which is we can sense a danger, and then our brain goes into this mode where we decide whether we're going to stay and fight or flight, so leave and escape. Every single sensory input that we get goes through the amygdala and can trigger that response. And then once that's done, the messages go to the other parts of the brain where we can actually think cognitively about it, where we can decide what we're going to do, where we can analyze, calculate, all those things. And so the reason this is relevant to biophilia is that if we're surrounded by things that don't trigger our fight or flight response, or that can soothe that response that might be happening, so things that make us feel safe, things that make us know that we have a shelter, safe sanctuary, food, water nearby, then that can kind of ease the negative effect of things in our life that immediately cause that fight or flight response. So stresses at work, stresses at home, lights being too bright, sensory inputs that people might find a bit too overstimulating, all sorts of things. And I have a quote from Dominique, which I can read out, which I think was really, really interesting, which was that she said, if we're not connected to nature, then the brain becomes hypervigilant. And because of that, if it doesn't sense water, vegetation, food, or shelter, then it starts being in a sympathetic nervous state where it increases your heart rate, it increases your respiration, it increases your blood pressure, and so on. So these are all the kind of things that we feel when we're stressed, an elevated heart rate, that feeling of anxiety in your chest, or that feeling of being sweaty because you're nervous. And those things can be softened or negated altogether when you're surrounded by things that help you feel safe. And those things are plants. Like I said, there's a lot of research out there that indicates this. And what I thought I would do is just point out a few interesting studies, not many, but just a few which I personally found interesting, which talk about the benefits or the measured benefits of indoor plants and the benefits of greenery, particularly on mental health and well-being. This first study was about indoor plants in an office and how they can prevent being tired, fatigue, during attention-demanding work. So in this study, there were 34 students. They were placed in one of two conditions. And one condition was an office setting where they had 4 plants around them, which were either flowering or had a significant amount of foliage, so leaves. And then the other group was placed in an office setting where they didn't have that. It's very simple. One office setting with plants, and then the exact same office setting without, and not many plants, just 4 plants. And to measure their fatigue, they did a reading span task. So basically how long they could read and stay focused. And that was used to measure attention capacity after an intensive task, like a really hard study or a task that required a lot of focus. The results were very clear. The students that were in the office where they had 4 plants around them performed significantly better than the students that weren't surrounded by the plants. And then what they did is they repeated this test after a certain amount of time. So they basically did the test once after the intensive activity, and then they did it again 20 minutes later, and the benefits didn't change. So the students that were showing a benefit from the plants, that effect remained, and the students who had no benefit because they didn't have the plants, their, I guess, levels either remained or decreased. So not only is that effect of plants improving your fatigue noticeable and measurable, it's actually quite constant, and it's not like an instantaneous effect. It can be present for a while. And I forgot to say this little caveat before I start talking about these research papers, which is that for most of them, I just have one single stock image, which is usually a pretty terrible stock image, and I picked because they're either funny or pretty low quality. As you can see in this one, where I have this fantastic stock image of a student frustrated or stressed sitting at their desk, and I picked this because the next paper I wanted to talk about was this one called Impact of Use to School Landscapes on Recovery and Stress from Mental Fatigue. And what they did is they measured the effect of students in a classroom having just a view of greenery. So not in the classroom, but a window that showed any kind of greenery outside. They took 94 high school students and they had them in 5 different schools, and they were randomly assigned to 2 different classrooms, one which had no windows whatsoever, and another one which had windows that opened up to a space, like a built space that had greenery, or a green space, a natural space. What they did is an intensive classroom activity similar to the study I spoke about before this. And then they did an attention test straight after that. And what they measured in this study was not just what students reported, but also physiological indicators of stress. So they actually measured their skin conductance and also their body temperature, both of which go up because your body temperature goes up when you're feeling hot, when you're stressed or nervous, and your skin conductance goes up when you're feeling a little bit stressed or you're perspiring because you're nervous or stressed. The results were similar to the last study in that the students that were exposed to greenery outside that window showed much lower of those physiological stress indicators. This study was done to try and inform school site selection. So for a new school, choosing a natural setting or designing the school such that you could have a window or a classroom that faced an outdoor setting or a greenery. And then it also could be used to inform if your school is already existing, your building is already existing, your workplace building is already there, then how can you recreate this impact without having to completely change the building? And the answer is pretty clear. You put plants either outside the window, on the windowsill, or close by. Fractal geometry is something which, when people talk about it, sometimes this image that comes to mind is the one that's in the top left, which shows what fractals were when a lot of mathematical research first went into them, into fractal geometry, and it was made really famous by a scientist called Benoit Mandelbrot. What it means in terms of nature is the same thing. It's geometry where a pattern breaks up and into 2s, 4s, 8s, etc. So in the fractal geometry image, you can see a large circle surrounded by small circles that break up into smaller and smaller and smaller circles. This kind of fractal geometry is really, really evident all throughout nature. So plants and leaves that start off as a single leaf and then branch out not once but twice. And it's also really, really evident in a lot of natural geometry and living things like animals and humans. And you can see that in the nautilus shell in the image up the top there, like a snail shell. This kind of fractal geometry, this pattern geometry is really, really obvious in a lot of succulent plants and also a lot of ferns. And the image that I've included there on the right is of what I think is one of the coolest examples of fractal geometry, which is in a type of broccoli called Romanesque Broccoli. And you can get the seeds anywhere. It's not like a rare plant or anything. You can grow it in your own backyard just like regular broccoli. And you can see that single head of broccoli is actually built up of multiple florets, like any broccoli, but those florets are like spirals, and each of those florets has tiny little florets on it, which are also spirals. And you can go down that again to another iteration of it. That's what fractal geometry is. And there's a quote that I'd like to read out about this from the paper that I've cited at the bottom of this slide, which is that we are so separated from nature that we make up for its lack by imbuing our surroundings with those geometric qualities found in nature. We try to shape our immediate vicinity so that those qualities reproduce our response to natural environments. So this is something which is built into us. We look for geometric repeatability, we look for geometric sequences, and we look for these patterns in nature. And if they are absent from our surroundings, then our brain is working overtime trying to find them in order to feel safe and in order to feel reassured that we're surrounded by not only nature, but healthy nature. So something I wanted to include about fractal geometry in indoor plants was a bit of a show and tell. And I have 3 plants here around me where I can kind of point out what this idea of fractal geometry or geometry where the plant is fracturing, if you like. So the first one is this philodendron here. It's often, sorry, not philodendron, it's this Rhaphidophora. I can never say it right. It's often sold as a mini monstera or a philodendron. It's actually neither, but it's in the same family. It's in the arid family. You can see in these leaves, they break up. It's just a very simple example of it, but you can see how the leaf starts off big at the end of the petiole, and then when the leaf starts, I have these two big lobes here, and then two smaller lobes here, and it's kind of like it's breaking out into those little bits. That's a really, really good example of very simple fractal geometry. It doesn't look like what fractal geometry usually invokes in the mind, but if your mind is looking at geometry like this, just simple geometry like this, you can get those positive benefits. Trees are a really, really good one for this because trees branch. They have branch out of branches and then mini branches and eventually the leaves. I have an indoor plant here. This is Morton Bay Chestnut. They're often sold as magic bean plant, which is kind of frustrating because it tells you nothing about what they are. But it's a native plant. It's actually a Bushtucker plant, native to New South Wales and Queensland. And it grows kind of like avocado seeds, if you've ever done that. It grows like from these chestnuts that you harvest from the tree, and you can germinate them in water and grow these beautiful like miniature trees as indoor plants. If you grow them in the ground outside, they grow to between 5 and 20 meters tall. It's a really big tree. And it's those chestnuts, which when prepared correctly, and it's actually a really complicated process, you can eat. And if you don't prepare them correctly, you get really, really, really sick. Anyway, what I wanted to show is this branching nature of the tree. A big branch here, and then splits into these branches here, and then from each branch is a leaf. And in each leaf, you can see that fractal geometry in the veins. So there's like a main vein down the middle of the leaf, and then it splits up into little veins all around the leaf, which you can see in most plants. That's another really good example of that branching geometry. Not only that, but the lush greenery and the really interesting look of the plant, which can invoke that feeling in your mind of feeling safe, feeling near food, and feeling like you're sheltered. And the next one I wanted to show is just this really, really, really common indoor plant, which is the alocasia. This alocasia has just grown a really, really nice big new leaf. This is another example of that fractal geometry. The main vein of the leaf goes all the way up like this, branches out into these separate veins, and then it's hard to see on this this webcam, but in between each of those veins, more veins branching out, getting smaller and smaller. Just like tree branches, just like fractal geometry, things breaking and getting smaller and smaller. So that combined with just how beautiful and lush the leaves of this plant are, again, can cause that. This is the kind of thing you don't need to know. You don't need to be conscious of that fractal geometry to get the benefits. Your brain, like I said, has evolved this tendency towards these things. So in the background, if you just have these, you don't even have to be looking at them directly. If you just have these around you, like at your desk, in your classroom, at work, at home, your brain is doing that work in the background, getting that input to the amygdala and thinking, okay, I'm safe, I'm sheltered, I'm near food, I'm near water because these plants are alive. It's okay, and I can relax. Another set of research papers, all of which are cited at the bottom of this slide, showed that interacting with nature, especially with the presence of water, can increase self-esteem and mood, reduce anger, and improve general psychological well-being with positive effects on emotions and behaviour. I found this one really, really interesting because of how it looked at the combination with water, and what it immediately made me think, and what it actually speaks about, or what a couple of these papers actually speak about, is the impact of having ponds in gardens, particularly Zen gardens or gardens that are included in places like monasteries or temples. Things that since hundreds of years ago, since before our ability to research this with modern psychology and modern neurological perspectives, we've known that we find ponds and water-based nature really, really relaxing. And so that image that came to my mind was of like a koi pond like that, or a naturally occurring one like a billabong, which you can see in the image on the right. Early Australians, first Australians, I should say, one for survival because it's a water source, but two for safety and shelter. Often lived around bodies of water like billabongs. I haven't seen any research that shows that they specifically about them being relaxing, but I'm confident that there would be at least some kind of connection between the two. The other reason I found this really interesting is it's relevant to what we do at Farmwall, because a lot of our products, a lot of our work is around aquaponics, which is growing with water, which has fish in it. Something that I found really, really beneficial to my mental health, and I know other Farmwall customers have, is having one of our home aquaponics kits, because you can work hands-on with the water in the kit to grow your own plants. If you're taking care of that water, trying to keep it really good quality, you feel really, really rewarded when it's clear and when the fish in it are healthy, and when you see the plants that you've grown, and not just some microgreens that you're growing that you can eat for your own personal health, but also indoor plants that you can grow in there. And one of the reasons I'm sure is because you can look at those plants and have that feedback response where you see the fractal geometry and you know that you're close by to food and natural shelter and safety. One other research paper showed that just observing the plants, say not like touching them or being near them or smelling them or seeing them, but just looking at them, so just images of them, have been shown to release these relaxation indicating chemicals. So basically, they measured chemicals in the brain that showed you were relaxed. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't say exactly what it is, and I wouldn't even try to, at the risk of mixing it all up. But in this research, what they did was something really, really simple and really interesting. They had a really simple task, which was they had participants move pots from one point to another, from point A to point B, and that's it. One group had pots that had plants in it, so foliage plants. The other group had pots with no plants in them. And what they did straight afterwards, they measured these neurological indicators for relaxation and comfort, these chemicals in the brain that show that you're relaxed and that you're comfortable, or that you're not. And there was a clear improvement in, as you could probably guess, the group who did the task with the pots with plants. And one of the reasons this is a really interesting study, I think, is because they were doing a physical task. So throughout the task, their heart rate increased, they started perspiring, and these are indicators of physical stress, but also psychological stress. And the difference was clearly made that despite that physical stress on the body and those physical stress indicators, the brain told the researchers, I am relaxed after being around these plants. And this is my favorite stock image as well, this guy in a suit floating on a cloud in the city. So something else I really wanted to highlight was that diversity is key. And this is something we spoke about last month in Biodiversity Month, in that diversity is really, really important for promoting and keeping strong biodiversity in your ecosystems and your natural settings. The exact same factor is key to promoting all of these positive mental health benefits of having plants around you. If we are looking at a monoculture, so a single plant, we don't get any of these same benefits that you would have from having a lot of different plants. So having that mixture of life, having some life that is assisting other life, sheltering, like plants, bigger plants sheltering the smaller plants, bigger plants providing you shade while the smaller plants might be providing you food or just something nice to look at right in front of you. These are really, really important to maximizing those mental health benefits. I have another quote about this, which I'd like to read out, which is a quote from Dr. Dominique Hess from her talk last month, which was that the benefit is extended. So the benefit of having indoor plants around you is what she's talking about. The benefit is extended when it's diverse nature. So being out in nature, the greater the diversity, the greater the benefit. And that goes back to this evolution of where is there diversity, and those ecosystems which are more resilient and therefore we're able to survive in them longer, where we didn't need to move on as quickly. So again, it comes back to our tendency towards a surrounding or environment which we know can support us. So, yeah, that's it. I'd like to talk a bit about my experience as well, because I have what I think is a really positive experience with how plants have benefited my life. There's not really a story to tell here, but I've included the first picture in the top left of me wearing a suit. That was my my LinkedIn profile image from back when I was in my previous career, which was working in engineering as a consultant. In that image is someone who's smiling, but who has relatively poor mental health. So I was in a very stressful job, anxious all the time, depressed some of the time. I wasn't in my natural setting. You know, we say like a plant thrives in its natural setting. This is a Patrick that wasn't thriving in his natural setting. And I wasn't surrounded by plants every day. I was in an office cubicle, bright white, fluorescent lights, a lot of stressful things around me. But my positive experience is that I really found benefit in coming home at the end of every day and going straight to the garden. So if I had a day where I was stressed or frustrated or just feeling flat, or another really common experience was that I was really tired all the time, even though I was sleeping quite well. And I was also sick a lot more. What I found was at the end of a day where I felt any of those things, I would walk through the front door, drop everything, quickly change into some comfortable clothes and walk straight out to the backyard, to the garden. And even if there was nothing for me to do in the garden, I'd find a way to busy myself or at least feel like I was doing something. And sometimes that just meant sitting there and looking at things and thinking about what I could do next. And the impact was profound every single time. I could come home feeling all of that stress, anxiety, feeling really tight, feeling really anxious. And then even after just 5 or 10 minutes sitting in the garden, all of those emotions would ease. And I was able to find at least, if not a relaxed state, then a nice, constant, manageable state. I was really lucky to have a backyard and a veggie patch where I was doing all of those things that could really help. And all of the, I guess, my best moments in the garden really improved my mental health and also feelings of self-worth. And reduce my anxiety and stuff like that. And I was also surrounding myself by indoor plants inside. The images I've included there is one of these sunflowers that I was really proud of that I grew, and I was feeling particularly happy about it. And the other one is the first Romanesque Broccoli that I ever grew. And I actually didn't know at the time that it would look like this. I pulled these seeds off of the shelf at Bunnings without actually knowing what they were. I just wanted to grow a few different broccolis. So when I first saw the head of this Romanesque broccoli, I was really stunned and really amazed. And I was having that experience where I was looking at the head of broccoli and seeing that spiral fractal geometry, and feeling really good and also really interested, and my attention increased. And then, of course, I went and read about it and found out about this fractal geometry in Romanesque broccoli. The pictures on the right are more recent photos, and I live in an apartment now, so I can't get these benefits from going out to my veggie patch now. But the image you see of me there surrounding my plants is one which, if it's not obvious that I'm much happier, I can tell you that in that moment I'm much happier than any moment that I was back when I was working in my old career. And part of the reason is I've learned a lot more about why I love plants, what I love doing around them. And so when I do plant with them, or when I surround myself with them, I do it very intentionally and very specific. I'm very sensory seeking. So whenever I'm potting plants or pruning them, I touch the leaves a lot. I like touching the soil a lot. And I've also done a lot of new growing, which has kept me very interested. Part of that has been using the Farmwall ecosystem kit, which you can see in the other two images. Propagating plants has been a really fun experience for me. And I've no doubt that having those activities which are hands-on keep me grounded, because I'm getting a bit of sensory input, but also because I'm seeing the geometry in those plants. I'm seeing them grow because of things that I've done, and I'm seeing myself subconsciously surrounded by things that make me feel safe. that's all led to an improvement in my mental health. So that's it. Because of, I know my experience, the contrast is clear to me, and that is that plants have played a really critical role in improving my own mental health. And I really believe that that is not something specific to me because I love plants or because I'm a horticulturalist. It's something that I have evolved to have built into my brain. And it's something that everyone has, except for the very, very, very few people, like 3 or 4 in recorded history, who have been born without an amygdala. All of us have this in us. So yeah, that's it. That's the end of the presentation as well. I really hope that it was informative and beneficial. And yeah, I guess the best way to wrap up is, if you're wondering about what to do next, the answer is to just get away to sense the nature. If you have no plants inside, go and buy one. If you can't go and buy one, walk outside and see if you can find some nature to look at. Or if you have a window looking at any kind of tree, someone else's backyard, even if it's weeds on the concrete outside, just look at them. And in the background, it'll be no effort to you. In the background, your brain will be doing that subconscious work to help you feel better. And then when you're ready, buy another 100 indoor plants, grow your own veggies, go for long walks in the bush. I guarantee you that you'll feel the benefits of it. That's it. Thanks.